what is the power of judicial review in our American politics? What should the power of judicial review be? Well, if we go back to the founders, we certainly can say that they believed in the power of judicial review. That if a law or an executive act violates the Constitution, then judges should enforce the fundamental law of the Constitution instead of enforcing the law. Otherwise, the Constitution would have no more force than an ordinary statute. And we want to protect the fundamental limits on political power that the Constitution contains. But note that the founders meant that judicial review would be for manifest or clear violations of the Constitution. Why? Well, because if you're talking about a provision of the Constitution being unclear or uncertain, then we don't have any grounds to say that this is what the people ratified, and we don't have grounds for saying that the judges would be enforcing the people's will and not their own will. So, in order to exercise judicial review properly, we need to restrict the exercise of judicial review to clear cases, cases where there's a clear violation of the Constitution. Now, unfortunately, there's been a fundamental shift in the notion of judicial review in American history. Judicial review is no longer enforcing the clear command of the Constitution. Some people argue that, in effect, it's judges giving clearer meaning to an unclear Constitution, an obscure Constitution. Now, how has this come about? Well, some people interpret certain phrases of the Constitution as very majestic and vague generalities. So, for example, the Due Process Clause and the Equal Protection Clause have been interpreted as general protections of fundamental rights. In effect, they say, treat people justly. But of course, if judges are interpreting a provision that guarantees some vague conception of justice, then the judges can read their own conceptions of justice into the Constitution. And that enables them to make public policy instead of simply enforcing the command of the Constitution. Now, why has this come about? Frankly, I think the reason is that some people are dissatisfied with the Constitution as it is written. That is, they're unhappy with the fact that it doesn't contain things that they want it to contain. It doesn't contain abortion rights or same-sex marriage, for example. The judges had to read those things into the Constitution to achieve those objectives. Now, sometimes conservatives do this as well. For a major portion of American history, the court read certain kinds of extreme property rights into the document that weren't there. And in a few cases recently, I think they've done the same thing. So it's not just liberals or just conservatives. There's a temptation on both sides. The problem is this, that sometimes when you don't get what you want in the political process because you don't have the votes to get it, it's easy to look at judicial review as a kind of fallback mechanism. So when you fail in the democratic process, you just go to the judges and you get them to rectify the situation and to do what you want them to do. That's a fundamental problem because it's getting away from our democratic Republican roots. When you think about it, the judges are not elected, they're not subject to re-election, they can only be removed by impeachment, a very difficult process. That is, they're not meant to be responsible to the people because they were understood to have the job of enforcing the Constitution, even sometimes when the people aren't happy about that. But the democratic credentials that they had was that they weren't simply enforcing their own views, they were enforcing the views of the Constitution. That's what judicial review should be about. We have to return to the founders' notion to get away from a situation of judicial activism where judges are able to read their own views on social issues into the Constitution, to decide important public policies like abortion rights and same-sex marriage and many others, rather than simply enforcing the terms of the Constitution itself, that is sticking to the role that they had in our fundamental constitutional system.